here's the problem. Milligrams per cubic meter isn't a very tangible number we can use to extrapolate a milligram per kilogram of body weight range with. As always, I did my absolute best to calculate this milligram per cubic meter to milligram per kilogram of body weight, so you don't have to, and then we can use that to interpret the rest of the scientific evidence regarding what kind of beneficial effects we can expect from a single human clinical trials, because all of the other scientific evidence is based on animal models. Myoinositol trispyrophosphate has been investigated as a potential anti-cancer drug candidate during a clinical trial back in 2015, which is over 10 years ago. I've summarized the results for easy digestibility, as the accompanying study publication is a bit hard to interpret. The pending brand name of myoinositol trispyrophosphate was Oxy-111A, not oxymetholone, but Oxy-111A. The investigated conditions of this single clinical trial was the maximum tolerable dose of ITPP in patients with secondary hepato, pancreato, and biliary neoplasm, pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma, colorectal cancer, liver metastasis, or hepatocellular carcinoma. The sample size was 28. The investigated treatment duration was 3 weeks, with a follow-up duration between 10 days to 5 months. The investigated dosages, and here is where we start to run into problems, but don't worry, I already did the conversion for you guys. We'll address that a little bit later on. The investigated dosages were between 1866 milligrams ITPP per cubic meter up until 14,500 milligrams ITPP per cubic meter, 3 times weekly for 3 weeks through intravenous administration. The reported half-life in this clinical trial was between 1.3 to 3.3 hours based on the intravenous administration, not by oral administration, which is generally how we take ITTP for recreational endurance and stamina purposes. And the reported beneficial effects were decreased angiogenic biomarkers, which is beneficial in the context of resolving various kinds of cancers, improved disease stability and chemotherapy treatment outcome. The reported side effects were elevated diastolic blood pressure, but that was below 20 points, but this was only observed at the higher dosage groups. Upper respiratory tract infection and fluid buildup in the abdomen, but this was likely due to cancer progression, not from the treatment or administration of ITPP. Reported blood work parameter changes were as follows: decreased vascular endothelial growth factor levels, decreased angiopoietin 1 and angiopoietin 2 levels, decreased epidermal growth factor levels, decreased platelet endothelial cell adhesion molecule levels, also known as cluster of differentiation 3-1, hyperkalemia due to the co-administration of calcium chloride, because myoinositol trispyrophosphate has calcium chelating properties, more on this later. And the other reported side effects were hyponatremia, that's low sodium levels, hypokalemia, that's low potassium levels, hypomagnesemia, and hypophosphatemia. What a mouthful. And the maximum tolerable dose based on the single clinical trials was up to 12,390 milligrams myoinositol trispyrophosphate per cubic meter. Now, here's the problem. Milligrams per cubic meter isn't a very tangible number we can use to extrapolate a milligram per kilogram of body weight range with. As always, I did my absolute best to calculate this milligram per cubic meter to milligram per kilogram of body weight, so you don't have to, and then we can use that to interpret the rest of the scientific evidence regarding what kind of beneficial effects we can expect from a single human clinical trials, because all of the other scientific evidence is based on animal models. The additional problem is that in order to calculate milligrams per cubic meter to milligrams per 1 kilogram of body weight, we have to use the average body surface area and average body weight of humans, and then specify that for both men and women. And finding the average weight for men and women is already problematic enough, because I'm sure you guys understand that the average weight of humans, whether those are men or women from the Western world, like America, Australia, Europe, etc., is a little bit different than the average weight of humans, men or women, in Asia or other parts of the world. There's a huge discrepancy there, maybe 10%, 20% discrepancy in overall body weight and potentially overall body surface area. Again, this was a bit of a brain bender. I might have made some mistakes here or there. I reverse engineered the formulas once I was done with the calculations, converting milligram per kilogram of body weight back to milligrams per cubic meter, and I got comparable results. If you want to point out my mistakes, though, do so in the comment section. Just do me a solid, please be gentle, and use some Astroglide before you get into it. In the clinical trial, the investigated dosage range was between 1866 milligrams to 390 milligrams ITPP per cubic meter. We're not including the highest investigated dosage because that's where all of the side effects were generally observed. This was administered intravenously 3 times weekly for 3 weeks, so that's 9 administrations in total. The average body surface area of humans is 1.78 cubic meters. For men, that's between 1.87 to 1.91 cubic meters. And for women, that's between 1.66 to 1.71 cubic meters. The average body weight globally is 62 kilos, aka 136.7 pounds. It's quite light from what I would say. And in the bodybuilding community, that's basically 1 dumbbell for dumbbell rows. The average body weight globally for men is 65 to 90.6 kilograms, which is 143.3 to 199.8 pounds. And for women, that's 49.8 to 77.5 kilograms. 77.5. Wow. Which is 109.8 pounds to 170.8 pounds. Man, some of you girls are thick AF. And it brings us to the converted dosage range. The dose per 1 kilogram of body weight is anywhere between 16.9 to 112.3 milligrams myo-inositol transpire phosphate for men and women combined, based on their average body surface area and average body weight. But if you want to differentiate between men and women, the dosage would be for men between 10.8 milligrams to 101.9 milligrams myo-inositol transpire phosphate per 1 kilogram of body weight. And for women, that's 14.1 milligrams to 149.9 milligrams ITPP per 1 kilogram of body weight. And using this range to convert that to the weight of a bodybuilder or fitness enthusiast or an endurance athlete, and I'll leave that entirely up to you. For a 100 kilogram bodybuilder, and the rest of the details are on the screen, obviously, that would be between 1,080 milligrams to 15,000 milligrams myo-inositol transpire phosphate intravenously 3 times weekly, which is reasonably high, that higher end of the range. But at the lower end of the range, that will basically mean 500 milligrams myo-inositol transpire phosphate intravenously daily. And you might be able to get a comparable effect if you administer that orally instead. Now, I don't think that any of us are after the anti-cancer, anti-tumor, or anti-angiogenic effects of myo-inositol transpire phosphate, because angiogenesis is beneficial for endurance and stamina to allow for increased blood flow to metabolically active tissues. And if you impair that, if you impair the hypoxia signaling resulting in angiogenesis, then, the vascular endothelial growth factor and all of the other growth factors which are necessary for improved angiogenesis are somewhat reduced, and then in the long run, endurance and stamina might be hindered. And it's especially important not to combine myo-inositol transpire phosphate when you're upregulating angiogenesis with compounds like TB500, BPC-157, etc. Using some highly dubious extrapolation and calculations, the calcium chelating effects were observed at approximately 22.6 milligrams per 1 kilogram of body weight onwards. So that means for a 100 kilogram bodybuilder, that would mean a dose of 2,260 milligrams myo-inositol transpire phosphate, where calcium levels and the other electrolyte levels in the bloodstream might start to deplete, which is double the anti-tumor or anti-cancer dose for a 100 kilogram bodybuilder, and probably 2 to 3 to 4 times the dose of what I would generally recommend. So these dosage ranges I would consider to be the maximum tolerable dose, even though it's the lowest effective dose based on the clinical trial. But again, in the clinical trials, even though the side effects are minimal regarding blood pressure, the effects on angiogenesis and calcium chelation is something I would likely want to avoid if I use this compound for longer periods of time.